Hey everyone, my name is Luis Enriquez, and today I'm here at RD1000. Today, we're going to be looking at how different drainage systems and levees affect the flow of water through a floodplain. Now that we understand what this presentation is going to be about, let's get started. Let's talk about the elephant in the room first. What in the world is this? This is called a stormwater floodplain simulation system. I know it's a long name, so let's break it down. Stormwater is a fancy way of saying rain, and a floodplain is an area of low-lying ground next to a river, like here, that's susceptible to flooding. Now that we understand a little bit about what this is, we can look at the different parts here. This is called a rainmaker, or at least that's what we're going to call it. When I pour water into this rainmaker, you see these little holes on the bottom? It's going to allow the water to come down as if it were rainfall. Pretty cool, right? Under this rainmaker, we have what we're going to call a parking lot. We see little cars here in the building. When the water falls into this parking lot, the water is not going to be able to be absorbed because it's well made of asphalt or concrete. When the water is not able to be absorbed, it's going to make its way into the river here as runoff water. What's runoff water? Runoff water is, again, water that's not able to be absorbed, and it makes its way into the river. And when it makes its way into the river, it's going to come past this valley here, and past this floodplain, as I mentioned earlier, and it's going to exit this way, through the little pipe and into the bucket. When I walk over here, you can see these, what we're going to call drainage systems. Here's a wetland and a retention pond. We'll get to those later. Now that we understand how this works, let's get started. We're going to imagine a powerful storm is brewing in the Pacific Ocean. As it makes its way inland, it's going to start to dump copious and devastating amounts of rain on the Natomas Basin. As the land starts to be devastated with rain, you can see that the water is falling into the parking lot, but it's not able to be absorbed. The water comes into runoff water and comes into the river, and as you saw right now, the water didn't quite reach the land, but it started to threaten the property and the lives. If it were to have come up more, imagine the damage it would do. The lives, the property, the animals. Devastating, right? Well, unfortunately, we have a history of that here in the Natomas Basin. In 1862, a series of powerful storms, known as the Pineapple Express, yes, pineapple, made its way inland into the Natomas Basin. And because the drainage systems and levees were not as advanced as they are today, severe flooding occurred. The water actually made its way inland and wiped out many lives and caused billions of dollars in damage. What a catastrophe. So what can we do to prevent such a terrible thing from happening nowadays? Well, this is where RD1000 steps in. Here at RD1000, one of the things that we focus on is maintaining levees. What's a levee, you might ask? A levee is the walls that are around the river that help keep it in place while it's flowing. In fact, I'm standing on a levee right now. If you look across the river, you can see the other levee. We're going to be using clay to represent these levees. Now that we understand a little bit about how levees work, let's see how effective, if at all, they are. So, another powerful storm brews in the Pacific Ocean. It makes its way inland, and as it starts to dump rain on the valley, it makes its way into the Natomas Basin and starts to dump rain again on the parking lot. As it starts to dump rain on the parking lot, you can see that it makes its way into the river, and what's this? The people are saved. The floodplain is not being flooded, the property is not being damaged, and lives are not being lost. Hooray, we did it, right? Well, I wish I could celebrate with you, but not quite. You see, when the river level rises, which it did right now, it puts more stress on the levees. And yes, the levees are strong, but they cannot hold that amount of pressure for a long period of time. So you might be asking yourself, what's the point of putting levees, right? I mean, if the threat of the flood is still there, if the levees are still going to break and cause flooding, why even put them? Well, fortunately, one of the other things we do here at RD1000 is drainage systems. Here we have a wetland and a retention pond. We're going to start with the wetland first. You might see all these sponges and thinking, what the heck is this? A wetland is an area of vegetation that is able to absorb the storm water, or at least a lot of it. We're going to be using sponges to represent them because, well, sponges absorb water too, right? Now that we have a wetland, one of the things that we can know about it is that, well, we need a lot of space to do it, and it's not exactly feasible here in this industrialized place. I mean, unless your house is made of grass, which I don't think it is, right? We use more open areas and rural areas to do so. So let's see how effective this wetland is, right? Let's see if it really holds up to the challenge. So a more powerful storm brews in the Pacific Ocean. It makes its way inland. I'm even using 2 jugs for this. It starts to dump devastating amounts of rain. It starts to fill up this wetland. It even splashes over me because it's so powerful. As it starts to dump on the wetland, you can see that there's no runoff water yet. Well, now there is. There was no runoff water initially because it was not saturated yet, meaning it can still take on more water. As more rain falls on this wetland, you can see that a little bit of runoff water comes out. The runoff water is minimal, so the river level is also relatively low. And because it's relatively low, the pressure on the levee is a lot less. And because it's a lot less, there's low risk of flooding. See how this works? It's like a jigsaw puzzle. A jigsaw puzzle towards preventing flooding. So as I mentioned before, the wetland is more common in rural areas. But what about more industrialized areas or more areas similar to this one? This is where I introduce a retention pond. A retention pond is a bowl-shaped area that's artificially made to collect runoff water. Runoff water, when it starts to fill up this retention pond, it comes up to a certain level and then it releases it in a controlled fashion. You might have seen street drains on the side of your neighborhood or even on the side of a highway. A lot of these street drains lead into these retention ponds. These retention ponds are often these, if you think back to your old childhood, or even you still do now, these ponds where you can go feed the ducks or even go fishing. Now that we understand what a retention pond is, let's see if it lives up to the challenge. So, the rest of the storm comes in, more powerful than ever. The rest of my jugs, they come inside to the Natomas Basin and they start to dump devastating amounts of rain. It even splashes all over me again, and it starts to fill up the retention pond, and as you can see, it filled up the retention pond and the water is coming out very slowly. This runoff water is very minimal, and like the wetland, it's keeping the river level at a very, well, relatively low level. And because, again, the river level is low, it puts less pressure on the levees and helps prevent flooding. Another fitting piece to this elusive jigsaw puzzle. Now that we see the effects of these drainage systems and levees, let's look back to the first trial, where the water came inland and threatened flooding. You can imagine that such a situation, or even a flood, would be devastating in our more industrialized and modern world. Well, I don't mean to scare you, but it technically could still happen. You see, depending on where you're at in the Natomas Basin and where the levee breaks, your area in the Natomas Basin could be put anywhere from 3 to 16 feet of water. That's really high. Scary, right? Well, this is where RD-1000 is going to put their foot in and say, I'm here again. You see, RD-1000 and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers are currently working on the Natomas Levee project. The Natomas Levee project is going to ensure that the 46 miles of levees that surround the Natomas Basin are fortified and can protect the valley from 200 plus years of flooding, so that you, your grandchildren, and maybe even their grandchildren will be safe from flooding. For more information on this presentation or the Natomas Levee project, you can visit rd1000.org with just a click. I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. Have a great day, and thank you for watching.